Ahoy folks, how goes it? I was hoping to record this earlier, but unfortunately I lost my voice. But here we go. So I wanted to make this video to talk about December, especially my attempt at the Winter Visual Novel Jam 2023. If you recall, to September, I enjoyed making my Spooktober entry, Remnants Council of the Dead. It didn't go totally according to plan, but I learned a lot. One of the most exciting developments was that I became much more comfortable with Ren'Py or Ren'Py, which I use to make my main visual novel nowadays. For this game jam, my goals were to learn how to create additional features for a visual novel, mainly to create a sprite that could walk for the first scene. I also wanted to improve my dismal art skills through pixel art. In fact, my goal was to create all the art assets for the project myself. It was a big goal as a solo dev project, and in hindsight, maybe I should have lowered my expectations, but I was very excited to get going. To develop my idea, I first went through all of the rules in the game jam. By doing so, I'm hopefully going to come up with something that definitely fits the criteria for the jam. The rules for the Winter Visual Novel Jam were quite simple, and the most important thing was to ensure that I had a winter theme and a strong narrative. With that in mind, I thought back to the time exploring cold places around the world. I loved visiting a Polish village in the middle of winter, which had a stable for horses. It was a great experience for me, and I loved being surrounded by the forest and the deep snow. I've also been lucky enough to experience Hokkaido in northern Japan during the winter. Again, a lot of snow. It reminded me of how comforting a warm, cozy cabin-like interior can be. I also recalled finding a documentary on, and I know I'm going to pronounce this terribly, Yakutia. Very fascinating. This is a village that is said to be the coldest village in the world. The documentary illustrates how a family lives in such a difficult climate, and I spotted quite a few dogs around that lived among the people. With all this in mind and some research, I decided I wanted my story to be set in a wooden family home in a fictional village that is near a city in the distance. My theme would be hope and family, with the subtle story of war in the background. The Yakutian Laika is a very special, beautiful breed of dog, and I decided that my main character would actually be the dog itself. This would mean no inner monologue, which is a common feature for some visual novels, and it would make the player have to decipher what they see in the background and read between the lines of the characters to have a good understanding on what might be happening. While I worked on the rough outline to my story, I also wanted to spend time building the game itself. For the first few days, I thought I'd be using Ren'Py to make my projects, and in hindsight, I probably should have stuck with that plan. I started researching ahead on Ren'Py's resources that I could plug into my game. I found a really cool snowfall effect by tofu rocks on itch that I will definitely incorporate in some shape or form in my main project, and tofu rocks accessibility GUI looked really helpful as well. I also like the look of Phoenix Dev GUI templates, which some entries during Spooktober recommended, and I can definitely see how helpful it can be to me. If you're looking to start making a Ren'Py game, I highly recommend looking at resources like Phoenix Dev on places like itch.io, because they will make your life easier in the long run and will help you easily implement some things helpful for your visual novel early on. So, for this sprite walking effect in Ren'Py, I was determined to follow Per K. Grok's tutorials. I gave it a go, and we did get somewhere with it, but I hit a block as I could not work out exactly how to implement a door or transport. So when the player has gone enough on a certain direction, you'd move to the next room and the visual novel begins. I was umming and erring about how to solve this problem, and to be honest, I was very proud of the extent I managed. But then I was lucky enough to get access to a license on Construct 3. Suddenly it became so much easier to create the walking effect I wanted to create. with a parallax background. I found some snow walking effects from splat.org, chopped it up on Audacity, which is a free to use sound editing software, and randomized the sound so the dog moving would be a bit more interesting and realistic. For my sprites, I use a sprite, which quite a few pixel art folks seem to recommend. I picked a limited colour palette called Wintercode because I thought it would give my game a cool wintry feel, and then I developed my dog, which the characters affectionately called Laika, and yeah, they may as well call it dog, but never mind. For the backgrounds, I use a thumbnail method to sketch roughly what I wanted to do, and then define shapes a bit later. As you can see, these backgrounds aren't too complete, which is our first hint of how this mission might have ended. I finished writing the script in 10 days, which included getting some peer feedback, which was very helpful. The story had 5 characters, including our dog Laika, with Kuday, a young and sick boy, being the main character the player will interact with. We also have grandparents and a sister as well. The script was about 1,500 words, which I felt was just enough to have a good and concise story, which was this. A young, sick boy called Kuday makes a wish. Player moves Laika towards Kuday. Who eagerly invites him in and introduces him to his room. You find out that Kuday isn't meant to leave his room, and that some days are better than others. His parents are away in the city, and his sister has also disappeared. Kuday's grandparents are looking after Kuday and are working hard, but aren't impressed with Kuday's new spelling. Kuday's new smelly friend. They allowed Laika to stay, however, probably because they're too worn out to say otherwise. Kuday's sister returns next day to everyone's surprise, and through her you find out a dismal and sad truth. You are then left with a decision. Do you stay with the ill-fated family, or do you leave in order to try and survive? I wanted to write the dialogue in a childish way to accentuate naivety and the innocence of Kuday. Characters will talk to Laika, and the player could work out the dog language in order to select a response. Other than the final decision, these don't really affect the overall story, but I think are a fun gimmick and also trains the player in how to respond to the final question. My game seemed to be coming along quite nicely, and I was proud of being organised and using applications such as Trello to ensure I was keeping on track. I had a few problems with Construct 3, mainly on how to get the dialogue part working, which is probably the reason why I should have stuck with an engine that is specifically designed for visual novels rather than Construct 3. I had presumed that I would find a tutorial on using and importing JSON files to be a walk in the park, but the tutorial itself was highly temperamental and it wouldn't even load on some occasions. The way I sorted out, and I mean that lightly, the dialogue, was to use variables in this very ugly kind of way. I never thought I'd be one to say it, but janky fits the bill perfectly here. The system isn't perfect and will sometimes work and sometimes not, but that's the thing with game jams, knowing when to say, it'll do, Harry, it'll do. Unfortunately, that's when I had an emergency at home and I couldn't update the game for half the month. When things smoothed over with 2 more days to go, I did give it a go, but I couldn't submit the project in this state, or at least that's how I felt. The foundations were finally there, but it simply wasn't finished enough. Sometimes I think I should have submitted it and just updated the game in my own spare time. After all, this particular game jam was low stakes and there were no prizes either way. But at the time I was more fussed about what it could have been, I didn't quite recognise the big picture. As a solo dev on this one, when things happen at home or if you get sick, well, all productivity tends to stop. working in a team definitely has its advantages. But something I could do in the future is ensure I have the foundations of the game much earlier on, so if anything does happen, the game can still be submitted even though it isn't polished. The things you learn with these kind of challenges. I have to say I've learned so much from this game jam. I've developed a love-hate relationship, truly, with Construct 3, and feel much more confident with the program to develop other non-narrative games. I also look forward to using my RenP research on my main visual novel to help it come alive a bit more. Very excited to update folks on that in the future. But for now, that's the story for this game jam. I hope to give it another go in the future. I had a lot of fun. Until next time, see you along.